Started this late. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Yevamos Daf Kufiyud Tes. It's been a long day here in Chicago. We're going to learn the Ilu Nishmas. I know there were a number of people who were killed from the wider Jewish community. Yevamos and their neshama should have an aliyah, and there should be no more of this. This is crazy. Let us learn another blot in Shas. We're getting close to the end. The reminder yet again, Wednesday's Daf will be at the wedding, for Rabbi Robinson's wedding. Let us learn tonight's Daf. Mishnah on the top of Kufiyud Tes, the beginning of a new parak, Ha'isha Basra. Ha'isha, the word Basra means the last one. It's the name of the parak, but the last parak was also referred to as Ha'isha. This is the last one, the last parak on Ha'isha. So the Gemara says, Ha'isha Shahalach Baila Vitzarasa the Medina Sayam. Let's paint the case. Reuven is married to Rachel and to Leah. Reuven and Leah go out of town. Rachel is left at home. And then they tell Rachel, Meis Ba'alech. While Leah and Reuven were out of town, Reuven died. So the halacha is lo tinase v'lo tisyabim. She cannot marry anybody else, nor can she do yibum to Reuven's brother Shimon, ad sheteda shema meuberes hitzarasa, until we know whether or not the tzara was pregnant. Because if in fact Reuven will have a child from the tzara, then there's no yibum, because yibum requires that there be no child. So the Gemara is going to pick up on the weird language here of shema meuberes he tzarasa, a bit of a strange language. Seems like an extra word. The Gemara will discuss that right out of the gates when we get there. That's part one of our story. Here's part two. Let's say that there was no brother yet. So same case scenario, that Reuven and Leah are out of town and Rachel's at home. However, there's no Shimon in the picture yet. And Hayasalachamos, there was a mother-in-law, and we don't know if she's away from Rachel. We don't know if she's pregnant. We don't know if she's having a baby. Now remember that back in the day, it was totally commonplace for mothers and their daughters to be having kids at the same time. If you get married at the age of 13, 14, 15 back in the day, you're a grandmother by 30. You know, whatever it is, it's very, very, it's not like our culture, which is, okay, the early 40s, it's very early. So it's totally reasonable. What if there was a mother-in-law, but we were not able to access her to ask her if she's had any new children, any new boys? Maybe another brother was born, and then the testimony comes back to Rachel that Reuven died. Does she have to be choshesh that her mother-in-law, who she has no access to, had another son, and maybe there's a din yibum? Says the Gemara, eina chosheshes. However, if yatzis Leah, if the mother-in-law went out of town pregnant, then of course chosheshes. And even there, Rabbi Yeshua says, Omer, no, eina chosheshes, because who says it's going to be a boy? And if it's not a boy, then there's no yibum. So all of the different iterations here, we're going to be discussing in today's Gemara about rov and about chazaka and about miut and about miut demiut, which are principles that we use regularly throughout psak halacha in order to get to the conclusions that we need to. Yes.
But doesn't this need to be born before Reuven dies?
Yeah, but we just don't know what happened. Do we have to be worried that the mother-in-law had a child before Reuven died? Yes, 100%. We just don't know what her story is. So the Gemara, as I already foreshadowed, is bothered by the language. My hitzarasa. Why on the second, on the fourth line here, it said, Shema Meuberes hitzarasa. My hitzarasa. Just say tzarasa. Why are you adding another word in the Mishnah? So it says the Gemara, Hakamash Malan, lahatzarahu dechayshinan. We only have to worry about this wife. However, aval litzara achrisi lo chayshinan. We don't have to worry about another co-wife, the one that, let's say he has a third wife somewhere, the one that he's not with. We don't have to worry about her. We only have to worry about this particular wife. At the two dots, the Gemara repeats the din that we saw in our Mishnah of lo tinase v'lo tisyaben v'chule. The din was that Rachel, who had heard the edus that Reuven had died, we said she cannot marry, nor can she do yibum. So it says the Gemara, let's pick this apart. Bishlama yibume lo. I understand why there cannot be yibum, because the dilma me abra v'kapaga be'eshesach deoraisa, because maybe the tzara is really pregnant and she's going to have a baby, and then Reuven is a father, in which case there's no din yibum, and then she's pogea be'eshes ach deoraisa. That would be a big problem. Elaloti nase amai, but why can't she just get married stam? After all, says the Gemara, let's analyze this question. Halach achar rov nashim, v'rov nashim misabros v'yoldos. This is a din of rov. Most women are not on birth control. Most women conceive, and therefore it's very likely the case that the tzara is going to have a baby. And if the tzara is going to have a baby, there's no din yibum. And with the edus that Reuven died, why can't she remarry? I understand you can't marry Shimon. I understand you can't do Yibum. That makes sense because we don't have enough information and that's being Pogea Be'erva. But why can't she remarry Stam based on the principle of Rov? So says the Gemara, Lema, maybe perhaps we can say that our Mishnah is Rav Meirhi Dechayish Lemiuta. Oh, this is a famous idea throughout Shas, a famous shita throughout Shas. If you don't know it, you should. And if you don't know it yet, this is where we're going to learn it today. Rav Meir is almost always concerned for a minority concern. However, that concern still has to be a reasonable minority concern. Rav Meir is choshesh lemiuta for an uncommon occurrence, but he's not choshesh for a double miut, for miuta de miuta, a very unlikely scenario, just an unlikely scenario. We don't have statistics in the Gemara, though the Mefarshim do give statistics about how we look at these cases, what's a miut and what's miut de miut. So anyways, how is it that our Gemara could be that we're chayesh lemiuta? Because maybe that Sarah is pregnant, but maybe she's going to miscarry. Oh, so if she miscarries, he's chayesh lemiuta. So then it's possible that there's really a din yibum. So that's why, that is why we don't allow her to get married to the shuk. Because if she gets married to the shuk, that's why we say lo tinase, because there's a chance that the tzara, who we assume based on a rov will be pregnant, we also push back with a miut that maybe she'll miscarry, and therefore she's not allowed to marry to the shuk. Says the Gemara, lav dafka, that this is only the shita of Rav Meir. Afilu tema rabbanan, even according to the rabbanan, who are not choshesh, who are not chayish lemiuta, they're not worried about a minority opinion. Still, our Mishnah could be like the rabbanan. How so? Because even though it's true the rabbanan typically hold of a rov and not a miut, ki azle rabbanan basar ruba, when the chachamim say that we follow the rov, that's only true with a ruba de ise kaman, with a rov that is in front of our eyes. Kigon tesha chanuyos v'sanhedre. Well, let's say you have a piece of meat, you don't know where it came from, but the 9 stores are all on Tui. That's a ruba de isa kaman. That's in front of our face. Or like the Sanhedrin, where there's a rove of people poskening one way. Rashi says 12 verses 11. That's a ruba de isa kaman. That's a rove that's in our face. Aval ruba de lesa kaman. This is a generalization of, in general, women get pregnant and have babies in general. That type of rove, which is a ruba de lesa kaman, this isn't a rove in front of us. There aren't 100 women in front of us, and we say 55 of them are pregnant. It's not a ruba de isa kaman. It's a ruba de lesa kaman. It may well be a rove, but it's not like lemaisa applicable to me right now. And lo azle rabbanan basar ruba. When it's a ruba de lesa kaman, they don't hold of a rove, and then therefore, even in our Mishnah, when it says that Rachel cannot get married, we don't follow the rov over here, and therefore the miut takes over, and therefore they would hold the same, that she's not allowed to get married. Asks the Gemara, you cannot say that we follow the Rabbanan, you cannot say like the Rabbanan that we don't hold of a ruba de lesa kaman. Why not? Because there's already a case scenario where the rabbis argued on behalf of a ruba de lesa kaman and counted the rov. What is that case? Third of the way down, Kufiyat Testament al. Hare, Katanuk Tana, de ruba de lesa kaman hu he, ve'az de rabbanan basaruba. In a case of a katan and a ktana, there is a rove about them that they typically are fertile and not a sris or an islandess, respectively, katan and katana. And we rely on that, bazlin and basaruba. Where do we see this? In a brisa. Titania, the brisa writes, katan uktana lo cholzin v'lo mayab men divrei Reb Meir. Reb Meir is of the opinion, remember Reb Meir is always chayish lemiuta. He says there's a chance that this katana is an islandess and the katan's a sris, and therefore lo cholzin v'lo mayabmen. That's divrei Reb Meir. Amru lo the Reb Meir, the Chachamim said back, Yafe amre she'ein cholzin. I understand that they shouldn't do chalitza because ish ksiv beparsha umakshinan ish ish, that you can't be a katan or a katana to do chalitza. That I understand. Elamatam ein miyabmen. Why would there not be yibum? So what does Reb Meir respond? Amar lahem katan shema yimtza sris, katana shema timsa islandess v'nimtzu pogim be'erva. There's a very unlikely possibility, but I'm concerned about unlikely possibility, says Reb Meir, that maybe the katan and the katana are infertile, which makes them ineligible for doing yibum. So what do the Chachamim say back to that? For Rabbanan, they say, Savre zil basaruba diktanim. The rov ktanim lav sris ninu, zil basaruba rov katanos, the rov katanos lav islandess ninu. What do we see over here? That the Rabbanan follow the rov of a katan and a ktana, that in general they're not infertile and therefore they're allowed to do yibum. But what does that show us? It shows us that the Rabbanan employ a ruba de lesa kaman. They employ a rov that isn't locally applied here. It's not 9 stores in front of us. It's a global, broad rove that applies to most ketanim and ketanos. And we see that we use that. So therefore, how can you suggest asking against the Gemara? The Gemara says that maybe our Mishnah, where it says that Rachel cannot remarry, is based on Reb Meir who's chayish l'miuta. The Gemara says no, it's even the Rabbanan, because they hold with a ruba de lesa kaman that we don't factor in that rub. Not true. By the Katan and Katana we see that you do. Therefore, says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, we have to fall back on our previous answer, Masnis and Reb Meir he. And the author of our Mishnah is Reb Meir. That's part 1 of the Gemara. Now we're going to question that assumption. You just said that our Mishnah is Rav Meir. B'mayu kimta, how did you establish of our Mishnah? How did you establish the authorship of our Mishnah, Rav Meir? And says the Gemara 12 lines from the bottom, but Ema Seifa. What did we say in the Seifa? We said that Hayasalah Chamosa, if she had a mother-in-law, Eina Chosheshes, but Amai. Why would we not be choshesh for the mother-in-law? After all, halachacha rov nashim, v'rov nashim is abros v'yoldos. And now let's do the math. Miut mapilos. Let's say that 5% of women miscarry. 5% of pregnancies are miscarriages. V'chol hayoldos mechza zacharim u'mechza nekeva. And of the remaining 95 births, let's make it an even number. 6% are, let's say 10% are 10%. They typically have. They typically have a mapala. They typically have a miscarriage. And the remaining 90, 45 of them are male and 45 of them are female. So the Gemara says, if you combine the miut, smoch miuta de mapola themechza nekebos, if you combine the possibilities of the 10% chance that she's going to have a miscarriage and the 45% chance that she's going to have a girl, what does that leave us with? That leaves us with habulei zacharim miuta. That means a 45% chance she's going to have a boy. That's a miut. What does Rav Meir hold by a miut? Belechush. So if you want to say that the Reish is Rav Meir, well, then something's wrong with the Seifa, because the Seifa seems to imply very clearly that there's a miut, and it's a very significant miut. I don't know what the percentages of miscarriages were back in the day. I know they're not terribly high now. They happen. Unfortunately, they happen usually very early on. It's even like the stillborns are still very, I don't know what the statistics are. It's not 10. I don't think it's 10%. I can't imagine. I don't. The numbers are very small. So anyways, Lamaisa, the way the Gemara plays out is that the Seifa doesn't match the Reisha. If you're saying that the Reisha is Rav Meir, then we're breaking our own rules in the Seifa, because it seems like Rav Meir should have been concerned about the mother-in-law having a son, thereby forcing Rachel to either do Yibum or get Chalitza. Says the Gemara, well, you're right that Rav Meir normally holds of a miut, but here we have something counteracting his miut. And what's that? Dilma kevan de ichsaka l'shuk lo chayish. Maybe when the mother-in-law left town, she had no children. She had no other children, and therefore there's a chazaka on Rachel that she can remarry when the mother left town. So maybe there's a chazaka working against the miut. That's what the Gemara says. And the Gemara says, if that's true, then Reisha de ichzak liyibum tiyabim. No. Then in the Reisha, there was also a chazaka that she should also be able to do yibum, because we would never have assumed that the tsar would have had a kid. It's a chazaka that the tsar is not pregnant right now until we know otherwise. So you can't say that. Therefore, Amar Rav Nachman, answer number 1 to understand what's going on here. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, the Reisha and the Sefer are very different. Reisha de iser kares chasheshu. In the Reisha, where the Isser for a woman, for Rachel to be with Shimon, when really it's a brother-in-law and really the Tzara had a kid, there we're not messing around. That's an Isser Kares Chashashu. However, Seifa, the Isser Lav, in the Seifa, where she may end up marrying, but it would only be an Isser Deoraisa and without Kares, then says the Gemara, Lo Chashashu. So that's very strange. Why is that strange? Because we're going to decide whether or not we're choshesh for a din derabanan based on the onesh of kares versus alav, but it's still an isur d'oraisa. So who cares if we're not talking about onshin? What you're doing is an isur d'oraisa. That's what the Gemara says here. Amar Rava Michti. This doesn't make sense. Ha d'oraisa v'ha d'oraisa. Mali isur kares, mali isur lav. You can't tell me the distinction between the Reish and the Seifa is onshin. We don't determine whether or not we're going to have a Gzeira Derabanan based on Kares versus Alav. They're both Isurei D'Oraisa. Let's take this as an example. We have a principle on Halacha, Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra. Does it only apply by an Isur Kares? Of course not. It applies by every Safek D'Oraisa. So the question is ridiculous, and therefore Rava gives his own answer. Elama Rava, turning to the top of Kufya Testament base. You're right. Reisha, in the Reisha, Chazaka L'Yibum V'Ruba L'Shuk. we have a chazaka and a rov. The chazaka leyibum is that as of right now, the tzara doesn't have a child. And the ruba l'shuk, what is the ruba l'shuk? I wrote this down, is that rov nashim do have children. So it's kind of funny, they're counteracting. One is a chazaka that she doesn't have a kid, and one is a rov that she will. And then we have to add in the following logic, which is that the chazaka lo adif ki ruba. The chazaka is not as strong as the rov. And then v'aisi miuta demapilos, we then have to factor in the minority, the 10% chance that the tzara will miscarry. And smoch lechazaka v'havale palga upalga lo tinase v'lo tisyavim. And the way that Rava understands the resha is that we really end up being 50-50. We have a chazaka plus the miut against the rov. The chazaka plus the miut against the rov equals palga upalga, and therefore we're stuck, and therefore she can neither marry nor do yibum. And Seifa, fourth line, Kubi Testament base. Seifa has chazaka l'shuk. The Seifa has a chazaka that she should be able to go out and marry anyone because the chamosa, the mother-in-law, wasn't pregnant. And viruba l'shuk, there's also a rov as well. And v'hava le zechara miuta de miuta. And when you factor in the statistical chances of the mother-in-law having a boy as a miut, we have multiple miutim adding up, and therefore it's miuta de miuta, one miut on top of another. Miuta de miuta lo chayish Rav Meir. So therefore, the Gemara is able to explain how our Mishnah is exactly like Rav Meir. Again, a lot of subtlety and nuance here. See the Rishonim here, beautiful Rashis and beautiful Tosfasim. But Bekitzer, we are going to hold of the following principles. Yes, our Mishnah is like Rav Meir, beginning and end. And the way we explain the end of our Mishnah, why we're not choshesh by the mother-in-law, is because there's a double miut. And Rav Meir is only chayish b'miuta, but he's not chayish in miuta de miuta. By the way, much as this is a great explanation of our Mishnah, we don't paskin like Rav Meir. So let's not make any errors here. Huh? Yeah, I think Tosfos says this openly. I don't remember where I saw this. I'm almost certain Tosfos says it somewhere. Okay, whatever, but we don't paskin like this. Anyways, the Gemara continues. We had said, lo tinase v'lo tisyavim. We had said that Rachel cannot marry and she cannot get yibum. And the Gemara says, what's the statute of limitations here? Can she never marry in this case? Let's repeat the case. Ruvain and co-wife Leah are out of town. Rachel stays home. Rachel gets news that Ruvain dies. The Mishnah says she can never marry or do yibum. So says the Gemara, ule olam. Is that true forever? That doesn't make sense. Omar Zeiri, li'atzma. Had it been that she was the only wife and Ruvain died, what would the rule be? Shlosha chodashim, as we know, that a woman cannot remarry for 3 months, lest she actually be pregnant, and that would be a problem. We need to know if she's pregnant in order to know if there's a din yibum. Lechaverta, but in our case, where Rachel is in town and the tzara is out of town, and we don't know what her pregnancy status is, no cell phones, then the chaverta, Tisha, she has to wait 9 months. It's a long time. Why does she have to wait 9 months? Because Rachel is in Chicago and Leah is in the Caribbean, and we have no idea what's going on with Leah. But Rachel's trapped. There's no 3-month din by her. She's not the one who might be pregnant. The tzara might be pregnant and might therefore either have a child and ruin yibum or not have a child and force yibum. And if that's true, she has to wait 9 months. And then after the 9 months is up, she can do chalitza and then she can marry anyone she wants. No problem at all. Says the Gemara, Reb Chanina Omar le'atzma shlosha. You're right about the first part, he says to Zeiri, who gave the first answer of 3 months and 9 months, but you're wrong about the second part. Lechaverta le'olam. When it comes to Rachel, she cannot remarry. Rashi qualifies this. Just take a look at Rashi. Rashi's halfway down lechaverta le'olam. Bishvil chaverta Rachel tzricha lahamtin le'olam ad shetedim yesh lav ladim lav. It's not 9 months and do chalitza. You have to wait until she finds out information about whether or not she had a child, whether or not Ruvain actually was shaykh to the world of Yibum. Why is that? Because we have no way of knowing, and chalitza alone is a problem. Says the Gemara, "V'tachlos mimanavshach." Let her do chalitza. Who cares? Says the Gemara, we cannot do that. Abaye bar Avin v'Reb Chanina bar Avin Amrei Tarvayu. They both said this, and we've seen this a couple of times in this Masechta already. Gzeira Shema Yehi Vlad ben Kayama. There's a concern that really, yes, there was a child born to the tzara, and there was no din chalitza ever required. V'nimtza atama tzricha kruz lekahuna. And what you did is you had a woman do chalitza for no good reason. But everybody thinks she's a chalutza and therefore an ineligible bachelorette for the Kohanim. So now you're going to have to go make an announcement, and that we don't do. Says the Gemara, why not? Walk into the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbosai, I don't know if you know, but this woman, we thought she was a chalutza. She's not. It turns out that Reuven really had a kid while they were gone with another wife. She is an eligible bachelorette. Says the Gemara, we cannot do that. Dilma ika dehavi bechalitza. Maybe there was someone who watched the chalitza, velo havi behachraza, but they weren't there for the announcement to say that really the tzara had a child, and really there was never a din chalitza, and she's not a chalitza. Ve'amrei kashar chalitza lekohen. And someone will make an error and say, oh, the chachamim are not so bright. They allowed the chalitza to marry a kohen. So therefore, we have to not only wait 9 months, we have to wait until we hear as to whether or not this woman, the tzara, actually had a child. Says the Gemara, I'm not sure that that's really true. Why not? Because Tanan, we have a Mishnah. We saw this Mishnah yesterday. We're not going to dig into the nitty gritties, but we will read it, of course, inside, third of the way down, Kufya Testament base. Nitan li ben b'medina sayam. Let's say that a wife is out of town and she has a baby. The Amra, and then she says, Meis b'ni v'achar kach meis baili. She says her son died, and then her husband died. And when her husband died, he had no children, thereby triggering Yibum. Ne'emenes, we trust her. But if she says, Meis baili, if my husband died first, the achar kach b'ni, and then afterwards the child died, Eina ne'emenes, we trust part of her ages, but not all of it. And therefore, v'chosheshin lidvareha. And what does it say? Why over there do we require chalitza? Maybe we should be concerned that Dilma asu edim ve'amre kidika amra. Maybe Edim will show up and say, Taka, she was right. And then you did your chalitza for no good reason. We're right back to where we started. If we say we really don't trust her, we're going to do chalitza out of suffix. What if Edim show up and say she was right? You forced her to do a chalitza. Now we have to go announce it to the Kohanim. They're going to think she's a chalutza. Amar Papa, great question. But in this case, we're making a nukim to Bigrusha. She had already been divorced prior. And therefore, no concern, because she's already ineligible for the Kohanim, because she's already a divorced woman. That we were hiding in a cave. No, there were no Eidim to be seen. They were in a private, remote island. There couldn't have been Eidim, and therefore, in that case, we don't trust her and she has to do chalitza. But Taka, the inference of the Gemara is that had it been a case scenario where there were Eidim that in theory could have showed up, we would not have made her do chalitza in this case. Next Mishnah, difficult Mishnah. We're going to go until about 5 lines from the bottom of the page, and then we're going to stop. Shtei Yevamos, there are 2 women who are Yevamos. Rashi adds in some critical information. We are 10 lines, 15 lines from the bottom of the page. The first Mishnah, the first Rashi and the new Mishnah, Dibur Hamaskal, Shtei Yevamos, Neshei, the wives of Shnei Achim. Reuven and Shimon are brothers, and Levi and Yehuda were also their brothers. Levi and Yehuda died. The 2 wives fell to Reuven and Shimon. So Reuven married the wife of Yehuda, and Shimon married the wife of Levi, whoever it is. The 2 wives who are not related to each other, but they have husbands who are brothers. Zu omeres meis baili. The zu omeres meis baili. If Rachel says, my husband died, and if Leah says, my husband died, zu asura mipnei baila shel zeh, v'zu asura mipnei baila shel zeh. Because the woman's testimony only works for herself and not the other woman, so then it's a problem. No one can marry anybody. Everybody's trapped. Because my Rachel's Edus only works for herself. And therefore, as it relates to Leah, Rachel's husband is still alive. And therefore, nothing she can do. She's trapped. Fine. Lezu Edim or Lezu Ein Edim. Let's say that Rachel has Edim that Reuven died and Leah has no Edus. As she yeshla Edim Asura, the woman who has Edim is Asura because she cannot trust the other woman who did not have Edus, and really Shimon may well still be alive. Edim Muteres, but Leah can actually marry Reuven because it wasn't the woman's testimony, it was Edim giving testimony, and that's very strong. Lezu Banim v'Lezu Ein Banim. Let's say that one of the couples has children and the other does not. As she yeshla Banim Muteres. The woman who has children, she knows she's not shaykh to Yibum because she has children with this man, and therefore she's muteres to marry to anybody she wants, no problem. But the woman who does not have children, she's trapped because it's possible that she's shaykh in Yibum, and we don't know. Nisyabmu umesu hayevamin. Let's say that they actually did go through with Yibum after the deaths of their husband in a mutter way. Now, do we again rely on the lenient psak of Mishum Aguna Gilu Barabana that one woman gave testimony? Does that have like a half-life? If a woman gives testimony about her own husband and then remarries according to that, and then that husband dies, can she use the edus that she gave to husbands ago for now? That's a machlokes tanaim. Says the Gemara that the Tanakama holds asuras lehinase. Rabbi Lazar Omer ho vehutru liyevamin hutru lechol adam. Once you had a heter to rely on your leniency of mishum guna kilu barabanan, all is well and good, and you can remarry according to that. Tana, we have a mishnah. Luzu edim ubanim. Let's say that you have one of the Yevamos has witnesses and has children, ulazu lo edim velo banim, and the other one, Leah, does not have edim and does not have banim. Shtehen mutaros. Both of them are going to be mutter to marry, and we're going to stop right here at these two dots. We'll pick up tomorrow night in Yirtzeh Hashem, 6 lines from the bottom on Kufiyat Testament Bays. Wishing you all a beautiful night.